We'll go to our last participant here now, Dr. Peter McCullough.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. McCullough, again, to me, just a hero. I doubt there's been anybody who's had more visibility, been more vilified, had more of their career destroyed than Dr. McCullough, but he's unbelievably knowledgeable. He's got to have a photographic memory. He said, no, he just studies hard, and I think that's probably the truth. So, Dr. McCullough, can you introduce yourself, describe your background, and make your presentation?
Well, thank you, Senator, and thanks to each and every one of you for joining in this invitation. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm in practice in Dallas, Texas, as a continuously board certified internal medicine and cardiovascular specialist, cardiologist, and non-invasive cardiology. I have a background where I attended Baylor University and then the University of Texas Southwestern, did medicine at the University of Washington in Seattle and trained in internal medicine, did 3 years of public service, obtained a graduate degree in epidemiology from the University of Michigan, cardiology from the Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine. I ascended the academic ladder, was chief of cardiology at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, chief scientific and academic officer for the St. John Providence Health System, effectively a dean. And prior to the pandemic, my major research focus was the interface between heart and kidney disease, of which I became the most published and widely known physician in that field in the world. I was the editor of the inaugural textbook, Cardiorenal Medicine, editor of 2 major journals. But in the last 4 years, my career has taken on a far more important purpose, and that is to make my contributions to alleviate the suffering that's happened upon the population, both with SARS-CoV-2 infection and the COVID-19 vaccine program. I published the first multi-drug protocol for ambulatory treatment of COVID-19 in the American Journal of Medicine. That became the most widely used platform worldwide. It was the base for the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. Senator Ron Johnson invited me on November 19th, 2020 to be the lead witness, bringing America the news that we could treat COVID-19. That was in 2020. At that time, Senator, I didn't even know what social media was. And I always credit you for kicking me in the butt to get going with social media. And as we see here today, I have the #1 doctor account on Twitter of doctors who see and examine patients, which I do in my office. So I want to summarize these points of what I've learned today, and then we can bring it open to some more broad questions for the panel. The first point as a cardiologist is that community SARS-CoV-2 infection has been exhaustively studied, and it does not cause myocarditis to any significant degree. There have been a handful of putative cases, no hospitalizations, no deaths, and at autopsy of patients who die with SARS-CoV-2 infection, the virus is not found in the heart, or there's no inflammation in the heart. So this is an important point. So we can rule out SARS-CoV-2 infection causing myocarditis. A false narrative developed in cardiology and is still promoted to this day by the American College of Cardiology, and it comes from measurement of blood troponin in the hospital, which is a blood test to detect cardiac injury. That triggers an ICD code that gets codified in the records. And so broad, non-specific data polls have indicated, 30 to 50% of COVID-19 infections have an elevated troponin, as they would with any other infection in the ICU. And that's led to a CDC and cardiology false talking point that the infection causes more myocarditis than the vaccine. Okay, this is very important. It's false, and it leads to even more perverse recommendations. The American College of Cardiology says that COVID-19 infection causes a lot of myocarditis, so therefore we should give the vaccine and cause more myocarditis. You can see how ridiculous this is. I have directly challenged the American College of Cardiology. I've challenged the American Heart Association, European Society of Cardiology. I've written them exhaustively. I've been effectively forced out of the American College of Cardiology over this important issue. The second major point, June of 2021, the FDA and CDC say the vaccines cause myocarditis. We've heard a lot about this today. They say that it cause myocarditis, and they have proven cases of vaccine myocarditis. 90% are men, peak age 18 to 24. It's after the CDC and FDA warnings that all the sports teams and the military dealing with young men at this age mandate the vaccines. So the mandates followed after the warnings. This is very important when it comes to culpability. What we've learned from the literature is that the messenger RNA is physically in the heart. That's been shown by Crossan and colleagues at Harvard. The spike protein is physically in the heart, shown by Boehmer and colleagues. Both of them cause inflammation. Schreckenauer and colleagues have shown that messenger RNA is directly toxic to the cardiomyocytes, as Dr. Milhoan has indicated. So this is clear. It's absolutely proven that messenger RNA and its product, the spike protein, cause myocarditis. It's my inference that all messenger RNA products are likely to cause myocarditis. The heart seems to be a target for messenger RNA, non-specifically, probably because of myocardial blood flow and other features. This is really important point. Point number 3, the most common presentation of vaccine myocarditis is sudden death. We don't even have a chance to save these people. It's very important. Holscher and colleagues have published, I'm senior author, have published in the European Society of Cardiology journal autopsy-proven cases of vaccine myocarditis. Not a single one had a chance to get an MRI or have blood tests. This paper was the #1 prize winner for the entire preprint server system for medicine, similar to what Dr. Milhoan pointed out. It's the #1 paper voted by the entire world on the US on the preprint server system before it was published in the European Society of Cardiology journal, which is a highly ranked journal. The 4th point is that if individuals have heart disease, they've had prior bypass surgery, congenital heart disease, or they have existent heart failure, they're more likely to manifest a cardiac vaccine injury that leads to an arrhythmia, like atrial fibrillation or ventricular arrhythmias, or develop heart failure. In my practice, I have a man who previously had a bypass surgery and an ICD in place, and he had a reduced heart pumping function, but he's a fully competent, high-level executive consultant. He took 1 shot of Pfizer messenger RNA vaccine, and he was in Emory University within 8 hours in cardiogenic shock, ultimately required a heart transplant, had a stroke, infection, reoperation. His life has been basically forever ruined by 1 injection of the Pfizer messenger RNA vaccine. And this is written up and chronicled in Trial Site News, every bit of this vignette. Emory University failed to report this to the vaccine event reporting system. In fact, they failed to acknowledge that the vaccine was the cause of this when it was so clear how fulminant his course was. And they encouraged him to take a 2nd shot after transplantation. And that's when he reached out to me to show you how deep this vaccine ideology is. It's basically like a religious belief. Now, the 5th point, very importantly, is that what we're seeing, I'm convinced, is the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg. The biggest published series of myocarditis before the pandemic, across decades and decades of accumulating data, was 500 cases. In my practice before the pandemic, I had only seen 2 cases of myocarditis, and one of them was fatal. Now there are papers, Lane et al. In the British Medical Journal Open, 18,000 cases in a single manuscript. I am seeing dozens and dozens of cases. In my practice, I have well more than several hundred cases with myocarditis. That is how common it is. And it's sad to say, I don't have a chance to see all of those who've died of a cardiac arrest. In the Holscher paper that I've quoted, the cause of sudden adult death syndrome is very likely to be vaccine-induced myocarditis. And it may be so sufficiently subtle, it couldn't be detected on an MRI, even if we got one. We have a hint that the vaccines fundamentally alter metabolism of the heart, and it was published by Nakahara and colleagues, demonstrating in 700 vaccinated, 300 unvaccinated, uniform abnormal cardiac positron emission tomography scans in the vaccinated. The myocardium normally prefers free fatty acids as a substrate. It shifts to preferring a diseased pattern substrate, 18-fluorodeoxyglucose, almost like an ischemic pattern. Maybe there's microaggregation of red blood cells and some degree of chronic ischemia in patients who've taken the vaccine. We don't know. All I can tell you is in this study, it's very disturbing. 100% of the cardiac PET scans are abnormal. Obviously, smaller fractions exhibit symptoms. But I have seen cases evolve and present now 3 years after the vaccine, with documented cardiac arrests 3 years after vaccination. So it appears as if we're seeing just the tip of the iceberg. The US FDA regulations on genetic products say that our window of regulatory concern is at least 5 years, and it may be at least 15 years after the injection. So I think we should be very sober about this, that we're looking at a very long period of time of concern for patients as the public wakes up to this. The final point is regarding management. I agree with Dr. Milhoan. We are finding that we can actually manage myocarditis if we can detect it. So the issues are screening and detection, use of advanced blood testing to the extent we can do that, and advanced cardiac and electrical imaging. We need to risk stratify people who are at risk for severe disease, including sudden death. Detoxification. I've published the 2 first papers on detoxification. The human body can't seem to get rid of the spike protein, but it looks like some natural products can assist in doing this. We're trying to find the right doses and the right dose schedule, but we have enough, you have thousands of patients under treatment. We have enough evidence around the world that it's working. It's very slow, but it's working to detoxify this spike protein out of the human body, assist the body in clearance. By personal communication, Kevin McKernan has implied that the messenger RNA will be broken down over time by human RNases. So this could be good news if we can just manage the spike protein. And then the other major principle of treatment is manage the inflammation, of which we use colchicine. I think colchicine may be one of the most frequently prescribed cardiovascular drugs now in the world. I commonly prescribe it. It was previously used for gout. But it is a class 1A indication for pericarditis. Most cases are actually myopericarditis. The Japanese use it extensively. Colchicine has been proven to actually, believe it or not, preventively prevent myocarditis, even in an individual who had a vaccine. That's been published. And it is a standard drug to be used. Recently, the FDA approved colchicine broadly for prevention of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So we should see and encourage a lot of colchicine use. It's a simple generic drug, can be taken once a day or twice a day in more severe symptoms. Sadly, I've had pharmacists deny patients colchicine when they understand it could be used for COVID vaccine myopericarditis, even though it's a class 1A indication. And then lastly, the goals in treatment is when we find heart failure or left ventricular dysfunction, we use standard heart failure drugs. And there are patients in my practice, and we've seen them elsewhere, that need ICDs or pacemakers or both in order to prevent sudden death or progressive conduction system disease. So in summary, COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis, I believe, is probably the leading cause of sudden adult death syndrome. We're seeing now just the tip of the iceberg. This is extremely worrisome. We have a great need for nationwide screening and detection programs, risk stratification, and for those discovered, preventive treatment to prevent sudden death and progressive heart failure. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. McCullough, again, thank you for everything you've done. Thanks for your time here today. We've only got about 8 minutes before I throw it back over to Andrew Bridgen. But I do want to ask you one question, because I don't know of anybody who, I read your Substack. I mean, you are scouring the literature. You're exposing, what we're learning. And of course, there's so much we still don't know. Why is the science being ignored? Why has it been ignored? What's the dynamic here within the federal health agencies, within the medical establishment? Why aren't they following the science?
This is a historical pattern. I'm becoming convinced of it. This goes back to the failed smallpox vaccines in the 1800s. There is a vaccine ideology, a hubris. And the ideology says that mankind is vulnerable to infectious diseases, and through the brilliance of science, we can make human populations more resistant and more robust. And when vaccine programs occur, even with the smallpox vaccine in the 1800s, these were dirty vaccines. They were contaminated with staph and strep and syphilis and tetanus. They couldn't be purified because it's the 1800s. And yet we fell into a pattern for decades of forced vaccination, untold numbers of vaccine deaths due to secondary infection. The vaccines didn't even work. People got smallpox so readily. This led to the Anti-Vaccination League, which was a well-documented public resistance to vaccination. The city of Leicester, England, did not vaccinate anyone for smallpox, became a control group, and ultimately fared much better. And then we go right into the polio vaccine, measles vaccine, diphtheria, and tetanus and pertussis. Once there is a commitment in this vaccinology for mass vaccination, it basically says, listen, the vaccines are flawed, but in order for them to work, everybody must be vaccinated. And in fact, we're going to turn a blind eye to safety. It's been going on now for hundreds of years, and this is exactly what's going on. Those little clips of showing, I think it was Paul Offit, that shows you how that his mind is thinking. That it's basically, it's an ideology. It's like a religion.